Hey, and welcome back to another video. And in today's video, we're going to be looking at how we can use ProgressView in SwiftUI and create our own custom view. So let's get straight into it. A ProgressView in SwiftUI allows us to display a spinner in our apps. This is normally to communicate to the user that some kind of activity is happening. So let's add a ProgressView onto the screen now. So let's delete our text and then we're just going to type some stuff out. So when working with progress views, if you want to add a progress view onto the screen, you need to use the progress view struct. So let's add this in. And then we're just going to add in some text below it saying loading. Cool. So now you should see the progress spinner if you run the SwiftUI preview animating, and we get this text below it as well. So you should see that the default for a progress view is a spinner, but when you're working with progress views, you're not just limited to using a spinner. You can actually turn it into a progress bar if you wanted to as well. So what we're going to do is actually add this into a group by embedding it into a VStack, and then we're going to just add in another VStack like so. And then what we're going to do is create a progress view, and if you look at the initializer for it, you'll see that you actually have a range of options that you're actually able to use if you wanted to. So even like we defined it here before, we actually could use a title string here that will get shown below it. So there will be no need to use this text, or we could use a localized string key by using a title key one here, and that would allow us to use a localization from our strings file. But what we want to do is we actually want to look at the option that gives us a string title and a value as well. So let's actually look at how we can add this in. So if we just scroll down, we should see the option to add in a title and a value, and that's the one that we want. Cool. So now let's add in our title here of example 2. And then we'll just give it a value of 1. So when you're working with progress views and you're setting a value, the minimum it can be is 0 and the maximum it can be is 1. So if you're having to do some kind of like calculations to decide what the percentage is, you need to make sure that if you're using this initializer, that it sits between 0 and 1, or else it won't work the way it's intended. So as you can see, we now have a progress bar that's filled, and like I said before, this is because the value is set to 1. But what we can actually do is actually get our progress view to increase and decrease depending on some kind of state. And I actually covered this in my video too, called State in SwiftUI, which you should check out. So let's actually add in our button within our VStack that allows us to increment our progress view by 0.1. So the first thing we need to do is actually create a source of truth for our view. So let's add this in now. So this source of truth that we're going to be working with is a double, because like I said, the value needs to be between 0 and 1, and we're going to use this to actually set the value. So rather than setting the value to 1, let's actually change this to progress second example like so. And then the next thing we need to do is actually add a button underneath here that'll actually increase this by 0.1. So let's do that now. Cool. So now we should see our button on the screen. And now if you actually tap on this button, because within the action we're actually incrementing it by 0.1, you should see that it actually increases. But you can see it's a bit choppy when you're doing it. So how can we actually improve this and make it smoother? Well, what we can do is actually wrap this within a with animation block. So let's actually put this in a with animation block. And now when we run it, if we hit increase, it's actually animating the increase for our progress view, as you can see here. And the reason why this is doing that is because when you wrap a value within the with animation block, because the progress view is observing the change to this value, we automatically get that animation for free. What about if we actually don't want to have a maximum of 1? Well, if we wanted to, we can actually define our own custom total where we can actually increase the value. So what we're going to do is actually give our progress view a max value of 100. So let's create another source of truth for our third example. So this time we're going to call it progress third example. And then we're going to create another VStack. But this time, rather than us having the value on its own, we're actually going to add in another parameter called total. So let's do that now. So we also need to update this to use our progress third example. Cool. So now when we run it, If we hit increase on the third example, you'll see here that it's increasing by 5, like so. And it will do that until it reaches its total of 100. But sometimes you may actually want to have your own custom view within the label that you're seeing here. So we can actually do this by using the label closure and removing our string from the title and title key parameter. So again, let's create another version of this. And then this time what we're going to do is actually delete the string like so, and instead we're going to create the closure that allows us to add in our own custom view in here. So I'm just going to add in a custom view, and this is going to use a label, but this could be any view that you want to use, and I discuss labels more in my video labels in SwiftUI. So what it's going to do now is it's just going to display the value within the progress third example state property that we have here. So now on our third example, if we hit increase, you'll see that we're able to read the value and see that within our label, so we can have our own custom view. So you could actually have it where you switch out the views depending on the value within your source of truth, or you could just use whatever it is you want to use here. But what I actually want to do is I actually want to center this. So you can see right now our label, the text is actually aligned to the left hand side. What if we want to actually put this in the middle of the screen? Well, all we need to do is just set the frame for this label to be a max width of infinity, and also set the alignment to center. So let's do that now. So if I just type out frame, and then if we just set the max width to dot infinity, and then if we set the alignment to center, you should see that our label now goes to the center of the screen. And that's because we tell the view to have a max width of infinity, which is to fill the whole container, and then tell its contents to be within the center of that view. So we've done this with the progress view with a progress bar, but let's see how we can actually add our own label to a progress view, which is using the spinner, like you can see here at the top. So I'm just going to copy our first example here, and then type this out and then break it down. Okay, cool. So now with our progress view, we use the closure to define the label that we want to show within the progress view. And you can see here that when you're using it like this, you actually get this effect where it's almost like dimmed out. Now, it's also worth noting as well that when you're doing this, if you're not actually passing anything via the initializer, you can actually just remove this, and this would still be valid. But it's just down to preference in terms of how you want to work with your views. If we wanted to as well, we could also change the background color. So we can actually change the color of this text and also the color of this progress view as well by using the tint and foreground color modifiers. So let's use the tint modifier. And if we set the tint of this to like blue, you'll notice that now our spinner has turned blue, but our text hasn't. So if we want to change the color of our text, what we want to do is set a foreground color of blue as well. And now you can see both our text and our progress view are both blue. But we can actually take this one step further if we wanted to, and we can actually create our own progress view styles, similar to how we created our label styles in our previous video, labels in SwiftUI. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a loading spinner like so that has a blue background and the text within it and the spinner is white. So let's create a new SwiftUI file. I'm going to call this ProgressView plus rounded style. Cool. And then within this SwiftUI file, for us to use our own custom progress view, we need to use the ProgressViewStyle protocol on a struct. So let's do that now. And by using this protocol, we get this function here that allows us to access the current configuration of the progress view that we're applying this modifier onto. So now if I was to type out configuration dot, you can see I can get the current value label for that progress view if we were using a progress bar. We can access the label for the progress view if it's a spinner or if it's a progress bar. And we can access the fraction completed if it is the progress bar, because the spinner doesn't have this fraction completed. So now let's actually type out some code where we actually apply the modifiers onto the progress view if you use this style. So I'm just going to type it out and then we'll break it down. So now what we're saying here is that we're going to create a progress view using the existing configuration that someone has used, and then we're going to apply some padding, give it a background color, and clip a rounded rectangle with a corner radius of 8. Now you may be wondering, what is the benefits of us doing something like this? Like, could we not just apply these styles directly onto the progress view within our content view? Well, it's worth you want to start thinking with your mindset that when you're working with views in SwiftUI, they're components, and sometimes you may have a view that shares the same styles, so you can actually split out your styles into their own modifiers and easily reuse them by using these structs with their own styles for whatever view you're working with. So let's apply this style onto our progress view. So we're going to copy this, and then we're going to go here, and then we're going to use that on our progress view. And you can see here with the progress view style, it takes in a style that conforms and uses this protocol. So now let's use our style that we created before, like so. And now when we actually run this on the SwiftUI preview, you should notice that we now get this rounded rectangle on our progress view. But you can see here it's a bit difficult to see. So what we're going to do now is actually apply the tint and foreground color that we were discussing and using before. So let's apply a tint of white and also a foreground color of white as well for the text, like so. So now this is a lot more nicer for us to see and work with. Now there's nothing wrong with you actually doing it like this, where you actually create an instance of your progress view style like so. But you'll notice, like when you're working with some modifiers, you almost get this dot notation syntax. So it's almost like a SwiftUI style guideline that is promoted. So we can actually recreate that with our own style by creating an extension on the ProgressViewStyle. So I'm going to type this out and then we'll break it down. So what we're saying here is that we're creating an extension on the ProgressViewStyle, and we're creating a constraint where this is only going to be accessible for any objects that are the rounded ProgressViewStyle. And if it is, then we create the static computed variable that creates an instance of our modifier that we defined here. So now we can access this by using a dot notation because we're using a static computed property. So let's go back to our content view, and we're going to duplicate this and then paste it below. And rather than having progress view style like so, we're going to say dot rounded. And you can see when this renders on the SwiftUI preview, you should see that we have two that look the exact same. So as you can see, there's actually nothing wrong with either approach, and it just comes down to this type of like SwiftUI style guidelines that you want to use. So that's everything in this video. If you enjoyed it, I'd appreciate it if you left a comment in the comment section below. Also as well, if you haven't already, I really appreciate if you gave it a thumbs up by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel, as well as hitting the notification bell to get updates whenever I release a new video. That's everything from me. I'll catch you all in a bit. Deuces.